All right, week 7 college football breakdown. This is a game that's been circled for a long time here in the Pac-12. USC still undefeated, traveling to Salt Lake City and taking on 20th ranked Utah. Utah in this game is a short 3.5-point favorite and a pretty high total at 65. This is the first play I made this week. Gave this out, I think, on Tuesday, locked it in on Tuesday, and the line hasn't moved, thankfully. Utah minus 3.5 is an official play for me. We wouldn't be getting this at 3.5 if Utah didn't lose last week at UCLA. What they did in that game has no bearing on how I view this matchup. This is Utah's biggest game of the season. We know how much better they play at home versus on the road. Salt Lake City is a real home field advantage. We'll get to Utah's defense in a second, although I'll say UCLA might just be really good offensively with what they have in DTR and Charbonnet going up against Chip Kelly. Perhaps that was just a bad matchup for Utah, but I feel good about this Utah offense facing off with the Trojans here. I mean, Cam Rising is a guy that now in his second year as the starter, we know he takes care of the football. 4-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's actually kind of developed into more than just a game manager. He is showing more acumen as a downfield thrower. He's got a lot of continuity with these wide receivers, and Tavion Thomas is a guy that last year was over 1,000 yards on the ground, over 5 yards per carry. He's dipped down a little bit in production this year, but I was encouraged to see that Tavion Thomas did rush for over 5 yards per carry last week against UCLA. The reality of it is I hate USC's defense. The one thing that they can do, and really the only thing I like about that defense, is their ability to create pressure on the quarterback. But, going up against a Utah team that knows this, I just think Utah's going to really just take advantage of that USC back seven. Still think USC's got lots of question marks at the linebacker position because they've allowed a lot of teams to establish the run, a lot of inferior teams, I might add. And I think their secondary is just going to get beat. This is the perfect, and we'll talk about this more with the offense, but this is a true clash of styles as far as teams go. You get the first-year head coach with a bunch of ringers out of the transfer portal versus an experienced, veteran-laden team like Utah that's really built from within. I'll take the team built from within, especially at home in this spot. Caleb Williams, there might not be a more high upside player in the country than Caleb Williams. We know what he can do at that quarterback position for USC under Lincoln Riley. We've seen it before. He's very vulnerable to some clunker games. We saw it a few weeks ago in a pretty easy on-paper matchup in Corvallis, Oregon. He was 44% through the air. He had a terrible game. He played losing football that day. And if Chance Nolan hadn't thrown 4 picks, they would have lost that game. So, and we even last year, when Oklahoma played Baylor, when in some of Oklahoma's tougher games, Caleb Williams he wasn't just, struggling. He was a liability. So I think eventually, probably more like next year, he could develop into a Heisman caliber quarterback. He's not there yet. He really isn't. And this is a matchup where I think he will struggle in. Obviously, he's got a ton of weapons to work with on the outside, and that helps. Really, though, in my opinion, the best player, the most consistent player in this USC offense is Travis Dye. This is a fifth-year guy. He played his first 4 years at Oregon. He's looked really good this year. Even in that Oregon State game, he really kind of propelled USC to that win. He's been a mainstay. Like I mentioned, Utah's defense looked a little bit concerning last week. They got to get pressure on Caleb Williams because that's something they weren't able to do against Anthony Richardson. They weren't able to do it very well last week. The one thing I will say from a running back perspective, facing off with Travis Dye is a little bit different than facing off with Zach Charbonnet, just two different styles of backs. Zach Charbonnet is a physical guy. He out-physicaled Utah last week. Dye is a much more of a, bounce it out kind of runner, more of a finesse type guy. And those guys, can play. But Utah was very effective facing off with Travis Dye in Oregon last year. Utah smoked Oregon twice and really kind of took Dye out of the game both times. Needless to say, this game is going to fall on the arm of Caleb Williams throughout the 60-minute game. I don't trust him in this spot. This line is short. I would have made this line 6.5. And preseason, I believe that's where this line was at. Sentiment is down on Utah a little bit, and I get it. This is a veteran-laden team. Kyle Whittingham has been there forever. They're built from within. They're veteran. They're experienced. USC is a team full of ringers. Lincoln Riley is still in his first year at USC. I think this is the spot where we see them, show some cracks, and this line is short. I'm going to lay the 3.5 with Utah at home. Official 1-unit play for me right now. Could even be upgraded to 1.5 unit. Best bet. All right, guys, before we get out of here, I know you see this shirt right here. If you're in the market for some new golf apparel, check out Proud 90 Golf. Unique, very comfortable polos as well. With the cold weather coming, they've also got a great selection of hoodies and quarter zips. If you see anything you like, at proud90.com, use my promo code Fordham at checkout. It's going to get you 15% off your order. Check the description for more information.